Oh, jeez. Boy, he just smashed it. Holy crap. This is a really big cut. Like very large. Holy smokes. Oh my God. One of the largest cutthroat I've ever caught out of here.
You really want me to do this?
I do.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to FlyFishDan's podcast, Fly Fishing and Stuff. Dan, fun fact. Dan is partial to pepperoni and black olive pizza. And by partial to, I mean he does not deviate from.
It's just going to be weird, right? First podcast, you got to start somewhere, right?
What are you calling it?
Oh, I'm calling it Fly Fishing and Stuff.
And stuff?
And Stuff.
All right.
Fly Fishing and Stuff.
And stuff. Awesome.
Yes.
We really knocked it out of the park.
I did. It took a lot of thought. And it was actually...
The and stuff was an afterthought.
No, Amy came up with that one. It was actually pretty good. It's like, that's kind of like an inside joke. We always say and stuff. And she's doing my intros for me, too. It's kind of cool. So, I got my notes right here, so you'll see me looking down here on occasion. So why do you want to start fly fishing, right? You kind of have to ask yourself that question. It might be because you want to try a new challenge. You want to try something different. I got to tell you, as I said earlier, right, I spin cast, did a lot of the traditional fishing, the level winds. I had a really great Shimano ultralight using the MEPS and, different type of rooster tails and spinning gear, that type of thing. But as soon as my dad showed me how to fly fish, right, I caught my first fish in one of the lakes out in eastern Washington, desert lakes, and it was a pretty good size rainbow. In fact, I even still have the first picture of my very first fish on a fly rod. But the difference is, so when you have spinning gear, you've got kind of a buffer between you and the fish. And what I mean by that is, you can still feel the fish on the rod, like you do a fly rod, but there's no direct connection to the fish, if that makes sense. Because with fly fishing, you're always having control of your line. So generally things are not weighted, right? Especially if it's dry fly, there's no weight at all. There are some streamers that have some weight, but it's really not much, right? Very little weight compared to what you would use in traditional gear. So when you first feel the fish hit, like your first time you get a fish on, it's the feeling in being able to feel the fish in your left hand and in the rod, and just it's starting to pull line, and you can feel that direct tension. You can feel right down to the minute, even when a fish is bumping your fly, you can feel it in your hand. So just that direct connection to the fish it's pretty spectacular, right? When you get your first fish on a fly rod, you're gonna fully understand. But it's this connection that you have to the fish, unlike any other style of fishing. So it's pretty cool. So that's one big reason why you might want to start and try fly fishing for yourself. I want to take away some misconceptions. Right? I want to encourage you to start. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that fly fishing is hard. It's super technical. There's too much to learn. There's too many things to consider. It really isn't. And part of the reason why I started, there's a lot of reasons why I started my YouTube channel, but one of the bigger reasons of why I started my YouTube channel is I wanted to take the intimidation, out of fly fishing. I wanted to just kind of strip it down to layman's terms, because for me, I've been doing it for almost 40 years now, and I've never got stuck in the weeds. I just never have. I don't get stuck in the fly fishing weeds. And I consistently catch fish. I may not know exactly the size of fly I'm using, or the exact name, or what grain of line that I'm using, or whatever, right? I know enough to catch fish, and that's all you need to know as well. You don't need to know all the nomenclature and everything that's involved with fly fishing. You just don't need to know that to get started. So don't be intimidated, right? And don't be afraid of the sport, because it isn't as hard as some people might have talked about in the past of it being. It's not hard. You might have had some friends or family, it's just too hard. It's not. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that today as well. So what do you need to get started, right? So there's really two schools of thought. And I'll kind of tell you what I did, what worked for me, right? My dad is the one that introduced me to fly fishing, and so he bought me a Cortland setup. And that's, it's kind of it's a good setup. A basic Cortland setup. It was a 2-piece rod. It was a 6-weight, 9 feet, and it had the Cortland reel already on it with line. So it was a little click and paw. Just kind of a basic fly rod and reel setup is what I started with. And it wasn't top of the line, but I'm sure my dad didn't want to spend a bunch of money just in case, I didn't get into it. But, no pun intended. I was hooked right away, right? So I knew that I was going to be in it for the long haul. So it was probably about a year after. Remember, I'm in high school, so I had a couple summer jobs, not a ton of money. But I saved up enough money to go buy my very first fly rod. And I wanted to buy something that was a little bit better, right? I wanted to buy... I went down to the Morning Hatch. That's an old fly shop in Tacoma. It's not there anymore. The guy, though, that owns it, Gary, he's still in the industry. So he reps, I think, Lamson and a couple other brands. So pretty cool that he's still in the industry. But anyway, I digress. So I went to Gary's shop and just said, hey, I want something that's kind of an everyday fly rod. I want it to be quality. I want it to last. So he is the person that introduced me to Sage. And my dad had also some Sage rods as well, so I was familiar with them. But he introduced me to, why Sage. And it's a quality rod. They were lifetime guaranteed. I mean, I could break it over my knee, slam it in a door, run the tip into the ground, and Sage would cover it. And they were local, right? They're still made in Bainbridge Island. So my first rod was the Sage DS, and it was a 6-weight, 2-piece fiberglass rod. And I put a Orvis Bat and Kill reel on it, like one of the ones that used to be made in England. So that was my first setup that I bought. So I spent some money on that. It was a couple $100, a few $100 for that setup, even back then. So you don't need to go spend a ton of money. I mean, if you go to your local fly shops, there's some really good stuff from Echo. There's good stuff from Reddington. There's some good starter setups there that are not going to break the bank. But even then, you're going to be around $200. But I recently did a video. I went into Walmart. This was actually inspired by another YouTuber, Hardman Fishing. He did something similar, so I kind of wanted to spread the message that, even if $150 is outside somebody's budget, you can get into fly fishing with a decent setup because Walmart has Cortland, and Cortland is still a great rod. And I bought a 5-weight, 8.5 foot. I do prefer 9 foot, just because it's a little easier to cast on the 9 foot. And it was kind of a medium action rod with reel and line. Now the line isn't great, but it would be good for a couple of seasons. And I think out the door it was like $72. So you don't need to spend a ton of money, and that included the rod, reel, line. I bought a 4X 9-foot tapered leader and some woolly buggers, and I went and caught fish. So for under $100, $72, you can try fly fishing, right? So you don't have to invest a ton to know if you're going to like it. And you're not buying garbage either. Cortland is not garbage, so this is a rod that you could have in your arsenal if you decide that you want to pick it up and you want to keep going. So we talked a little bit about weights, right? There are different weight classifications of rod. The lower the number, like a 2 or a 3 or 4 weight, the lighter the setup. And generally they're a little bit shorter. They range between 8 and 8.5 feet, sometimes in the 7-foot range. And then there's 5 weight, 6 weight, 7 weight, 8 weight, 9 weight, and on up, right? So the bigger the number, it basically is the bigger the fish that you're going after. So if you're going to be trying for trout, right, and I think the majority of those of you listening are probably, you that are listening, you're probably thinking about going to trout. 5 weight is a great everyday rod. 5 weight, I would recommend a 4-piece because it's easier to travel than a 2-piece, right? It's really tough to lunk around something that's 4 feet long in a rod tube. 4-piece is really easy to travel with, whether it's in your car, whether you're traveling on a plane or whatever else. It's nice to have a 4-piece. 9 foot, just a little easier to cast. And I would go with probably, and talk to your fly shop about this, kind of a medium action rod. They're a little easier to cast than the faster action rods, and they're forgiving, right? So I would recommend doing a 5 weight, 9 foot, 4-pieced, kind of a medium action. And again, you don't need to go top of the line. You could start off with just that Cortland setup from Walmart to see if you like it, and then graduate up to something that you're going to keep for a lot of years later. So if you're going to be going for bass, you do want to look at least a 7 to 8 weight, because a lot of times, bass, you're throwing these great big poppers. Bass can be heavy and fight pretty darn hard. And even though I've caught bass on a 5 weight, it's not ideal, right, to throw those big poppers. So you want a little bit heavier rod. But if you're doing trout, it's a 9-foot, 5 weight, 4-piece is where I would start. And then from there, you can start experimenting, right? If you're starting to do small creeks, maybe you're getting a 4 weight or a 3 weight. If you're doing sea run cutthroat fishing, if you're out here somewhere in the Puget Sound, that's probably a minimum size 6 weight. But for trout, start with a 5 weight. So what else do we want to talk about? What are the gear do you need? So you're going to need some flies, right? So one of the things that I wish I would have done is I wish, for a minute there I thought I wasn't recording. I was like, no. I wish I would have started tying flies. So I still don't really tie. I've tied a few, some horrible concoctions that actually caught some fish. But I've tied a few flies, but I wish I would have started tying earlier. But you can get into that, right? And that's a whole lot of money and a whole lot of investment. So for now, go to your local fly shop. There's also another guy, Jordan Red. He owns Red's Flies online. He ties a lot and has tied a lot of these patterns himself, but another family-owned business that you'd be supporting if you would rather buy online. But get some basic patterns, right? And you can do some research, and even I've done some videos, right? Woolly buggers are always lights out. If you're doing lake fishing, chironomids can be really good. I love the balanced leech. There's actually a guy in Spokane, Washington, that created that fly, and that thing is deadly. I love the balanced leech. You can get a lot of basic trout flies to start with, right? And really, you don't need a fly box. I mean, you could literally put them in the tin they come with and put them in your pocket, right? Now, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, it might be tough. There are some places you can fish just fly rod and flies in the pocket without anything else, but you'd be doing shore fishing. You're not going to be able to get into the water unless you got some boots or maybe some waders. But we'll get to that in a minute. So you might want to get a fly box, right? Because you open up that little container, they can go flying everywhere. So just buy a basic fly box. You can get a decent one for $20, right? So you get a fly box, you get some basic trout flies. Look on Red's Flies or go to your local fly shop and ask, what do I need for trout fishing? Talk about whether you're fishing rivers, lakes, or both. You got your fly rod now, and really that's all you need, right? To go fishing right now, that's all you need. Now you do want to get a net, right? You do want to get a net eventually, right? Because once you hook that first fish, if you don't have a net, it's doable. I've done it. I've actually forgot my net on occasion. I've done it, but it's not great for the fish handling aspect of it, and it's not great for you. You're probably going to break it off, especially if you're using lighter tippet. But you're gonna need a net to net the fish, and you can get, again, your local fly shop should have some basic nets. It's not going to cost you a ton of money. You've probably seen, if you watched my videos, I have a net. It is on the more expensive side, but it's more of what you would call an heirloom net, which means you're probably going to hand it down to somebody later on in life, or just keep it forever. But Hellbender, bamboo net, I mean, everyone is custom made to you, and they're works of art. I absolutely love mine. My new favorite net. Okay, so we got a fly rod, we got some flies, we've got a net. What else are you going to need? Sorry, there's some distraction in the background. Hopefully that's not too distracting for you. I'm not sure how much this mic is going to pick up or not. But so we got some. Where was I? So we got some flies. We got a fly rod. We got everything set up there. Oh, you're going to need some leader, right? Typically with trout leader, you're going to use either a 5X, and that is like a weight, right? The X stands for kind of a diameter, which translates to a pound rating. So if you're using like ultralight spinning gear right now, and maybe using 6 pound, that's going to be right around the 4X level. 5X is going to be a little bit lighter than that. Typically, if you go with 4X for everything but bigger streamers, that's a pretty good, well-rounded, tapered leader, right? 9-footers, tapered. The reason why you need a taper, if you look at a tapered leader, it gets really thick where it goes onto your fly line and then thins way down to to the ultimate poundage that you've just purchased. That taper helps roll out the fly when you cast it. So you can't just go straight monofilament unless you're like fishing a sink tip and you're really not concerned with getting a good presentation or cast. So you do need that taper. So you're going to need a 4X or a 3X taper, 9-foot leader to start off with. If you're fishing big streamers and woolly buggers and maybe it's a stocked lake or a stocked fishery, sometimes 3X is great, right? Because it's going to take a really big fish to break that off. And got to remember with fly rods, you got to let the fish run. You got to play the fish. It's not like spinning gear. A lot of people, when they first start off, they're breaking off a lot of fish because they hold on to the line. They don't let it slide through your fingers when the fish runs and it ends up breaking off. So I try to get the fish on the reel. And it's important to do that early on. Try to get it on the reel without letting slack happen so you can let the reel do the work and you're not trying to use your left hand to play the fish or if it's running off, that type of thing. So another thing to consider. But so now you got your fly rod, you got your fly box, you got your flies, you got your net, you got some tapered leaders, and you're basically ready to go, right? You're ready to go. And now, you can scour social media on some of your favorite websites to see if maybe somebody might have named a fishery. Talk to your fly shops, right? The best way to find out where to go fishing in your neck of the woods, stop by the fly shop, spend a little money, right? And if you're buying some of this stuff in the fly shop, that's your opportunity to ask, if I wanted to go catch a fish, a trout or a bass or a perch or whatever, where do I go, right? If you're spending money, they're going to give you some of their favorite spots to go check out in the local area. So that's a great way to start, right? Talk to your friends about where they like to go fish. But fly shops, it really is a great resource because I have to tell you from even experience, typically, some of the spots that I found took me a lot of years to find out where these spots are. And, I don't want to broadcast them online. No way, right? If you ask somebody where they're at, that's called spot burning, right? People don't typically like to spot burn because, it can be a very personal experience where you're fishing. So do your homework, right? Some of the best fishing that I found, I literally go onto Google Maps. They call it blue lining, right? I find a place that looks fishy or a lake that looks fishy. I have the Washington State Fish and Wildlife app to where I can literally find it on the map and press my finger on it and it'll show what it potentially has in there, its regulations, all those things, right? It's super, super convenient. So you will find some places initially to go catch some fish. Okay, so what else do we want to talk about? We can get into waders, but we can do that another time and talk about that. But because if you do a lot of river fishing, especially in the Pacific Northwest, it's tough to do wet wading because it's always friggin' cold. So you might want to get some waders, and then of course there's wading boots, right? But you don't need that to start fly fishing. So what else do we want to talk about here? So, of course you're going to need to learn to cast and I'm going to do another podcast that really goes in depth on some of the things that you need to know when it comes to casting a fly rod. It's doable, right? You don't need to cast 60 feet to catch a fish. You can literally cast 10 to 15 feet and that's good enough to catch a fish. So check out my channel. I've got a ton of tutorials that just kind of gives you the basics on casting a fly rod. You want to practice that before going out fishing. That's the most ideal time, right? Make sure that you can at least throw the line out there 15, 20 feet before you go fishing. Otherwise, you might have a far more frustrating experience if you're trying to learn for the first time on the water fishing. So backyard, a park, whatever, little green belt, try to do a little casting. But if that's just not an option for you, then it's okay to learn, right? You may not catch a fish the first time, and that's okay. You're outside, you're enjoying this amazing sport, and you're out in the outdoors and the river and the sounds of nature. It really is all-consuming. I literally don't think of anything else when I'm out there fly fishing except for what I'm doing. Work problems, go away. Home problems, go away. Anything that might be burdening you goes away when you're out there fly fishing. So it's pretty cool. All right, so what else do we want to talk about here? I've got my notes here. So I'd be interested to know. I don't know. Can you comment on a podcast? I think maybe you can, but I'd be interested. I would be interested to know. And you can always shoot me an email, right, at flyfishdan@gmail.com. Kind of any other, what are some of the challenges that you've been facing, right? What are some of the things that you'd like me to cover in the future when it comes to just getting started with fly fishing? So I'd love to hear from you. And I don't get a ton of emails today, so I try to answer anyone that reaches out to me, either commenting on YouTube or if they find me on Instagram or they send me an email. I'm pretty good. I do have a full-time demanding job, but I'm really good about getting back to you. So it might be a couple days, so be patient. But if you have a question for me, you're certainly welcome to email me that question. If you have any challenges that are standing in your way today, I'll try to help you overcome those. But a great resource for you really is kind of circling back is your local fly shops, right? Back when I started a long time ago, 40 years ago, we didn't have YouTube, right? There was no internet. There was no cell phones. I literally taught myself how to fly fish, along with going with other people that had fly fished for a while and got some tips from them. I had to teach myself. So today, though, you've got all these resources from fly shops to online courses to YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube that can really help you better your skill set much quicker than I did, 30, 35, 40 years ago. So a lot of great resources there for you to help you get started. A lot of gear reviews, a lot of advice. And just don't get stuck in the weeds, right? Get a basic fly rod and reel. Comes with line. Get some basic flies. Your fly shop can help you out. Get a box, get a net, throw some rubber boots on, and go fish the edge of one of your favorite lakes or a small stream. You don't need to get anything else other than that. Maybe a net, right? So to net that first fish that you catch. So, but there's other things you can do along the way. You're going to probably want to get a float tube or a pontoon boat. You'll want to get waders. You'll want to get boots. You want to get fins. You probably want to get a gear bag of some sort, whether it's like they call it like a fanny pack, a backpack, a sling pack. That's what I use. A fishing vest. I don't use fishing vests too often just because it kind of pulls down on my shoulders and it's not very comfortable over time. Sling pack's a little more ergonomic, but eventually you'll want to be able to put all your stuff in there, right? Because the first time you hook a fish with that fly, you've got a net, but sometimes the flies are so small, it's tough to get it out of the fish's mouth. So you're going to need a pair of forceps, right, to be able to take the fly out. Plus, what if you have to cut a fly off? Are you using your teeth? The dentist is not going to like that if you're using your teeth. So you might need a little nipper on that forceps. So your fly shops can really outfit you with everything you need, but you don't need it, right, to start. You'll eventually want to start collecting this stuff, but you don't need it to get started. And I do have also another video that talks about all the stuff that's in my gear bag. So feel free to check out my channel and watch that video, and it kind of shows you everything that I've learned that I need when it comes to fly fishing, but you don't need it to start. Get a little ash on some things here. So yeah. So what else should we talk about? Maybe that's enough for episode 1 of fly fishing and stuff. And I'm excited about starting this podcast because there's so much to talk about with fly fishing, right? I'm going to have Kobe on here as well. I taught him how to fly fishing. He's went from Padawan learner to master, so he has mastered the sport in a short amount of time. And it's cool to get his perspective, and it will be cool to get his perspective on things because he thinks outside the box, right? And that's one thing I do want to encourage you, right? It's easy when you start doing this for years on end to kind of get stuck in a mold, right? This is what always works. This is what I do. Change things up. Get creative when you're out there, and it's amazing some of the things you can catch fish on when you're out there fly fishing. So get creative. Don't fall. There's no rules, right? You just do your own thing out there, and eventually you're going to get into fish. But this might sound a little cliche, but don't be afraid to fail, right? It's going to take you some time, and that's okay. I did not go right out there and cast my first setup, and it was a perfect cast. It was a mess. The fly gets stuck on the line, maybe a tailing loop, and everything gets in a big mess. I'm casting knots into my line. The fly gets wrapped up in the monofilament, and I got to retie everything. That's normal. Just relax, take your time, and things will start to click for you. So it will take some practice. It'll take some time, but don't get frustrated, right? Every new fly fisher, when they first go out there, just think, oh, it's too hard. I can't do this. I can't get the line out. Just take your time with the cast. Take your time with the presentation. You don't need to bomb it across the lake or bomb it across the river. You don't need to do that to catch fish. A lot of fish are right in front of your feet. So just relax, watch some YouTube videos, some how-to stuff, get some inspiration, and you're going to be fine. I promise you. All right, well, I guess that pretty much wraps up episode 1 of Getting Started with Fly Fishing. We got a lot more to talk about, so be sure to subscribe if you want to learn more about fly fishing. We're going to have, there's just nothing's going to be off the table, right? We're going to talk about different gear and different tactics, and I'm going to help you out with fly fishing. I'm also going to give you some inspiration, right? Some of the things that have worked for me over the 40 years, and storytelling. I've got some great fishing stories to share with you, and some of the episodes are just going to be that. We're going to be sharing some stories and some of the experiences that I've had, and I've had some really cool experiences fly fishing, and so will you if you pick it up. So don't be afraid. Start fly fishing. I know you're going to love it. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the first podcast. I appreciate it. All right. Until the next time, fish on.